drone on too much with the lectures, I found a couple of awesome videos about using traditional tools to get through a couple of the doors. There's lots of good and bad YouTube videos out there. These guys that have put theirs together, I'm pretty impressed with, and it's a good refresher, good reminder. And we all are going to make mistakes. So forcible entry is a pretty good one to try and get in there. I'll give you our example here, Tweeter's Fire. We got to the Tweeter's Fire. They had been broken into before in their basement door, and so they had a drop bar on the basement door, and it completely defeated us as a fire department. We could not get through the drop bar on that bottom basement entry door where they loaded all of their stuff out. All of their food supplies all went into that basement door, and then they had a drop bar in there, which you'll see what that is here shortly, and it defeated us. We couldn't get in through that door. So we had to go around through the front door and change our tactics for firefighting that way. Now that I've seen a few of these videos, I think we probably could have accomplished entry into there, but it was just a lack of knowledge that kicked our butts. So it's good to learn forcible entry. It's important to know how to get through some of these doors and how to work on that. So that's just one example
You
anyway.
could see the bolts on the outside.
I don't remember if we
Yeah.
could or not.
That's
It's been a
good.
while ago, but I think we probably could.
That's the method, right?
Yep.
Punch those bolts.
Yep. So, but there's some good information out there on that. So we'll be talking about that a little bit and show you those videos on how to get through that. I mean, we had the K-12 out there sawing on that door. We had that thing so marred up, and it still kicked our butts, and we couldn't get into it. So, lack of knowledge and maybe a little bit more information, we might have been able to get into it and defeat that door, but it got to us. So, all right, forcible entry, your chapter 11. So we'll talk about some of the basic principles to start off with. First of all, forcible entry is usually a pretty big decision that should be coming from your officer or your command person on the scene. Because when you decide to do that, you're doing structural damage, which can do PR damage to you if it's used inappropriately. So you need to make sure that when you do decide to do that forcible entry, that it's warranted. So we get called out, for example, for a fire alarm, and we get there and we can see in the windows, there's no smoke, nothing showing, and we bust in the front door and find out it's just a dust and a smoke detector head, and it's on a commercial establishment. Well, commercial doors, if we've done a forcible entry on them, can be anywhere from $300 to $800 in a hurry, depending on how much damage you do to them. That business may be a regular donor to your fire department, not that that's everything that should motivate you, but you should be thinking about other options when you're going into a situation like that to decide if you're going to do forcible entry. One case of a local fire department, I won't say who, but got called for a fire alarm at a commercial structure. Just as they started swinging the axe on the back door to the commercial structure, up comes the owner with the key. He was in the parking lot when they started whacking at that door with an axe, and he had key in hand and said, "Stop, stop." Well, they'd already done 2 hits on the door and destroyed it. So it is important to try and be aware and to decide based on what type of situation you have. Obviously, you've got heavy smoke pushing, something like that. Don't be afraid to push that door as soon as you can. But just be aware that the circumstances should dictate how much force you use to do a forcible entry. Techniques that we're going to talk about apply to everything that we do. Now we focus on structures, but it can be applied to your vehicles. We don't have any passenger rail cars in the area, but we have aircraft. We have an airport in our fire district that we may have to respond to, and we've even had one crash in my tenure as chief here. So just need to be aware that that's a possibility for entry. And then ships or boats would be another place that you may have to do forcible entry on to get into. And we have some bigger boats in the area that we may have to use forcible entry on as well. So just some other things. So here's some of those factors that you have to think about. First of all, what do we have to do once we get there? So what tactics do we need to be fulfilled to decide if that needs to be a forced entry into a structure or into that location? Location of the fire, if there is one, or the location of the hazard in that building. If it is a fire, what stage is the fire currently in? What would be the effect if we pop that door open of ventilation? So we open that door, what's gonna happen when we open that door? Are we ready to go in with a hose team? Are we ready to do positive pressure? What's all involved with that? And then the effort required to force that entry. Are we talking about a couple old wooden doors on an old commercial building, or are we talking about a steel encased steel door that we have to try and force? Because there's gonna be a difference between those. One's a mule kick by a firefighter, and the other's gonna require tools and maybe some time to get through. So things to think about, the incident commander should be thinking about if they're gonna decide to do forced entry. And the more information that you can feed upward, the better decision that they can pass downward to you as a firefighter as they go. Make sure that you have an order to do forced entry, and the biggest one is try before you pry. And we can all be victims of that. We can all have that happen to us where we get so focused on things that we don't think about the big picture overall, or we forget to do the basics like check the doors. We had a vehicle fire at the amusement park parking lot. Get there, heavy smoke on the interior of the car. First thing that the fire officer on scene does is wax out the driver's side window. The thing that I do when I arrive in the second truck is go around to the passenger side and pull the door handle, and the door opens on the passenger side. Don't know why the driver's door locked, and only the driver's door locked, but it was the only one locked on the entire vehicle. The 3 other doors opened without difficulty. Not that it mattered, the car was totaled, but you should try before you pry. Make sure you try and open that car door, try and open that house door, and do a 360 around if you need to check for other options or opportunities to go in. Yes?
Perfect example, my car. The electrical outlets are going bad on it, and that's exactly what would happen. I'd locked out driver's side door, passenger side door would still be open,
You know?
so.
So. We've had it where, heavy fire involved in a house. We haven't, but I've seen videos where, heavy fire involved in a house. They get to the front door, locked and secured. They're gonna getting ready to force it, and you hear a radio call. I see, back door, it's open, come back here. So just watching different fire videos, I've seen that before, where they've done a 360, they check the door, oh, this back door is open. And sometimes that's the case, okay? Especially Iowa friendly. I lock my doors when I leave my house. I have a keypad for everything, but there's a lot of people in Iowa that don't secure their doors. We see that in the ambulance all the time. We pick them up by ambulance, and you want us to secure your door? Nope, it's okay, leave it unlocked. So it happens all the time where people in Iowa feel pretty secure and don't necessarily lock their doors, so. Don't like yours?
No,
Yeah.
I do.
So,
I do if I'm not home. Or,
Yeah.
yeah, if I'm not home.
For
so,
long extended period of time.
right. So it depends on how you feel, so. So yeah, that's what's meant by try before you pry. Try and get access to that structure if you can. Sometimes you may still need to force that front door, because if you come in the back door, you still can't get access to what you need to get access to. I've been to houses where the outside door is unlocked and I get to an inside door because it's just a porch or an entryway on a walkout basement, and I get to the inside door and that one's secure. Or you get through a garage door which is wide open and you get to the interior door and the interior door is locked. So there's different access points that you have to think about there. But always try before you pry. Reach out, grab that handle, give it a twist, give it a couple of tries sometimes, because sometimes the first time can fool you because you assume it's locked. So don't be afraid to check it real well to make sure. After trying normal entry, look for lock boxes. We use the Knox box system in Arnold's Park in Okoboji. Milford has it, Spirit Lake has it. There's a key in all of the fire trucks, and it is unique to us. So Milford can't take a key from their fire truck and put it in any of the locks in Arnold's Park or Okoboji. We can't take our key and put it in any of the locks in Milford and expect it to work. It's town specific. All of the lock boxes that we have installed have been called to dispatch, and they have a note on that address that says there is a Knox box on site, and this is the location of the Knox box, so we know. And we've used them a few times. Stone Fountain we use frequently. So that's an access point there right by the garage. We do have some residential ones, or one residential one for sure. They're a little bit smaller, look like this, usually have a single key. And we have one over on Summer Circle Drive. So that's what this one looks like. It's just a single key that hangs inside here, and it's a pretty heavy duty. It almost looks like a realtor box. But only our key from the fire department will open it. That's the only one.
Do you install those, or who installs those?
Usually I have them install them, so I don't have the liability for any damage to the
That's
structure.
what I was wondering.
But then we come back, get the keys, and we lock the keys in them.
Okay.
So they can get a sub for them, but I don't usually tell them that, because I want to have control of that box and the keys that are in it. So that's that one there. And then this is the typical commercial one that I've been recommending. You can get this one that mounts on the surface. You can get them where they're put inside a little bit. We have some, I think that they did the surface mounted ones on the Maritime Museum, and the new roof garden will have these on them as well. So, and then when they get keys in them, we'll lock it up and we'll have access. You can see they're a pretty heavy duty box, and even if they get them off the wall or get them pulled off the wall, it's pretty hard to get the keys out of them. Pretty hard to defeat. So, not impossible, but pretty difficult to do. For commercial establishments like this, these are like $350. We don't mark them up at all as a fire department. We don't try to make money because we want people to use them. So that's why we do that. And these are a lot cheaper. I can't remember. I have it marked on it. These are $160. It's a lot cheaper to buy one for the house than if that's what they choose to do. A lot of our bigger condo buildings have them. And some of those condo units have decided to put the codes to the individual doors in there, because it can get pretty expensive if we have condo units that are unoccupied in the winter months and we need to go in and check them for fire, or in a lot of cases for broken water lines from sprinklers or water damage. And for each door that we break down, it's about $300 to get that door replaced. So it gets expensive pretty fast. So a lot of those places will allow us to put the codes to their units in the Knox box. Some say absolutely not. Some of the residents say, no, you can't have mine. And we tell them that's fine, but if we get to your door and we need to open it, it will be open. So a lot of times that's shared. Some of the groups are just, that's fine. They want to be more protective of their stuff, and I can understand and respect that. But again, the only ones that have keys to that are fire department and the police departments in Arnold's Park and Oakville. Okay, so that's the lock boxes. If your department doesn't have that program, it's really easy to get into. You can buy the boxes as needed. You can get the keys sent to you. I don't think they charge anything for the keys, or if they do, it's not very expensive for the keys. And you can go as fancy as just putting them on a keychain in each truck. That's not a very secure method, but that's what we do. All the way up to Spirit Lake and Milford have specific codes for each of their firefighters. They have to enter in a specific code into the lockbox in the truck. It opens up, and then they have access to their Knox key that way. So it just depends on how specific and how guarded they want the keys to be in their area. So there's 3 areas that you need to consider for forcible entry. There's doors and locks. There's security barriers. And then using the proper tools depending on the doors and locks and security barriers that you're up against. So security barriers require specialized training tools and knowledge to force. They don't get a lot into it in your book, and I'm not going to cover it a whole lot because we don't have a lot of areas with security bars. Most of them though, actually I can't even say, I haven't seen enough in the area to know what the areas would look like if they have any on there. But most of them can be forced with conventional tools that we'll talk about here in a little bit on that. Okay, so let's talk about the basic construction of lock sets. And lock sets, as defined in your book, is a term used to describe all types of door latches, locks, and locking devices. And basically they're used to secure doors and prevent unauthorized access to structures. So if you have any specialized locks in your area, hopefully you're aware of them through a pre-incident survey. If you're not aware of a specialized lock, they can still usually be tackled, or defeated, sometimes not, like in our case with the drop bar at the tweeters. But if you know about them ahead of time, you can kind of have a plan of attack on how to access those anyways. So the different ones that can be found are latches, and then there's locks, and there's different types of locks. If you turn to 576 in your book, it kind of shows you, and there's more pictures in the presentation here, but the mortise lock is on page 576. The cylindrical is also on 576, and then the rim lock is kind of shown on 578. And the rim locks I see usually on older structures more. They're kind of a unique lock to the more older structures anyways that I've seen. I don't know if anybody's seen any different than that, but typically I see run into the mortise and the, I'm not even gonna try it. Yes. For some reason I can't get it spit out today, so. Then you have the non-traditional, which they talk about on page 579, which are multiple bolt locks, which may be just multiple deadbolts on a door. Keyless, which are the electronic keyless locks. You're seeing more and more of those, where there's a keypad on them, and then a lot of them are even connected to Wi-Fi now, where people can unlock their doors with their phones as they get home if they want to. Or I've seen some even where when they open their garage door, it unlocks the door in the garage for them as they hit the button on the unlock on the garage door. It's all programmed together depending on how fancy they want to get with their locks and how much money they want to spend on that stuff. So, and then the electromagnetic, and we have some of those in the area. The one I know about is at Charleston Beach Plantation. The entry doors are locked magnetically. The nursing home in Spirit Lake, Hilltop, or Acura, or whatever it is now, theirs is locked by magnet at night, so they have to enter a code to allow people to come in after hours into that facility. They can be defeated with enough force, but it takes a fair amount of force to overcome the magnet, or if the power is cut to the structure, then you can sometimes overcome those electromagnetic locks as well. So there's a picture of the mortise locks, typically mounted in the cavity on the door's edge and in the door jamb. In the door jamb, there's a cutout, also called a mortise, hence the name mortise locks. Some of them have just the handle and just the latch bolt there, and then some also include a deadbolt lock as part of their system with that. So it just depends on what kind of door system they have as to what'll be there anyways. The cylindrical locks are the most common lock set, and usually it's two holes bored in the door at 90-degree angles. One that goes through for the handle, and then the other one that connects through to the system from the edge of the door. And typically it's just a latch assembly. This is the most common type, and you'll find this mostly on your residential structures is where you'll run into this. Rarely on businesses, usually it's Panic Hardware and other on businesses. This is mostly home structures. And they have two types, the key and knob, which is shown on the left side there on the screen, and then the tubular deadbolt. Most of the time, if you need to breach doors with this style of lock on it, including the deadbolts on a wood door, is just to force the door itself. So most of the time you can defeat, even if they have multiple deadbolts on there. It may take just a little bit more force, but most of the time you can take the door even with that in place. Makes a heck of a racket, but if it's all wood, it usually doesn't take much. And I've seen whole inside frames come flying off, depending on who's running the tool or who's doing the mule kick to try and get that door open anyways. So it can be done and can be defeated most times. Some people are better at the door locks than others. They put the longer screws in, they put the longer bolts on the deadbolt, and so it may be a little bit tougher to get through some of those, depending on how good of a lock is installed on that door anyways. There's the rim locks we talked about, and there's 3 different styles there. The night latch that just shuts on its own when the door goes shut, a deadbolt that has to be turned, and then a vertical deadbolt that's in there. Anybody got an idea? I can't remember how that one works, and it doesn't explain it
There's
very
2
well.
pins that drop down through those little plates.
Okay, so there's 2 pins that drop down through the plates, you said? Okay. I haven't seen one of those, I don't think, before, so.
We had one on our old house.
Yeah. So. Okay. So, multiple deadbolts, or, as you see in the picture on the left side of the screen there, they may have multiple sides of the door that will have a bolt that goes through. So it may be on the top or bottom or both sides, just depends, and that lock may twist outward. When they lock the door, it'll secure all 4 of those. And again, that may be a tougher door depending on the structure. If it's wood framed or steel framed, the more bolts they add in there, the tougher it's gonna be to get through anyways. They talk about the electronic or keyless or digital there as well, and then the electromagnetic is there as well. And typically you can notice those. Sometimes if they're older electromagnetic, you'll hear them humming. As you come up to the outside of the door, you'll hear a light hum as you come up there, and you'll know that it's electromagnetic. I don't know what the typical force is on those, but it's enough that it takes a lot for you to pull it open by hand.
Place I worked at in Illinois, wasn't very much on theirs.
Yeah,
It was, you could just push on it and it'd pop
it
over.
would pop open, yeah,
Some of it, if they don't have it, the distance too,
right.
you know, if it's not close to the night. I've messed with one of those before, trying to get one set up on a door, and, yeah, they're kind of a pain in the butt if you don't get in position right.
Yeah, they don't hold very well then, yeah. I know the one over at, Charleston Beach holds well. So,
They have one that.
we almost broke out the glass if we didn't get the code to get in, so, cause we had a medical emergency in there one night, so. But we're gonna try prying first, but if that didn't work, the glass was going, so. Other locking devices that may supplement door locks, is the padlock, which is on the left side there. And then the drop bar is what I've been talking about, which is just a plate usually, put on the door. Usually on the outside, you'll see the carriage bolts that are run through the door that holds those, holds the U plates in place basically. And then they drop a board over the top of it, either to keep the 2 doors from pulling out, or this was just a single door. It wasn't a double opening door. And so it was just a single door, so it basically rests over the door frame and keeps you from opening the door that way. So makes it pretty tough to get into if you've got those, but like I said, I'm gonna show you a video here on how to defeat those. And it's pretty good with just basic tools anyways. Padlocks are, you know what padlocks are, portable or detachable locking devices divided into 2 types. And you'll see them, they advertise them as either standard or heavy duty. Standard are of course are easier to defeat. They're not case hardened steel. A lot of times you can take a bolt cutters if they're not, but you really can't tell the difference in most cases when you walk up to a padlock if it's case hardened or not. Bolt cutters will defeat the non-case hardened. The case hardened, it may shatter the blade on your bolt cutters. So there's a lot of different techniques, and we'll talk about some of them on how to get through the padlocks as well. Other things that we might run into, we already talked about the drop bar, the door chain. That's pretty easy to defeat in most cases. It's usually a pretty flimsy chain. It's usually just surface mounted, and so you can usually get past that pretty quick. If it's a heavy duty one, you can take your bolt cutters, run it through the door typically because it allows the door to be open just a little bit, and you can run them through there and usually cut that chain if you need to get through there. Door limiters are on most every modern hotel that's out there now. And it's the little piece with the curved piece with the ball on the end, and then the U-shaped bolt that slides over the top of that. Most of them you see in hotel rooms, especially in groups, that's holding the door open so the regular latches don't engage. But at nighttime, a lot of people will secure those. I guess I haven't had a lot of experience with trying to defeat those, so I'm not sure how difficult or not that they are to get through. So Surface slide bolts, and then internally mounted bolts are a couple other devices that you might run into as you are trying to access or get into buildings anyways. So now we're going to talk about some considerations that you must take when you're using forcible entry tools. Obviously, we should always be wearing PPE when we're using tools. Okay, anytime we're doing cutting, anytime we're doing forcible entry, there's a potential for injury, so we should be wearing our personal protective equipment with that. So some considerations when using your cutting tools, you need to decide if manual or if you need another power source, which tool would work better for each specific situation. Needs to be specific to the material that you're going to cut and how quickly that you need to get into there. Obviously, no tool cuts everything, so you need to make sure and pick the right tool for the job. And then if you're not using that tool correctly, you can damage the tool, you can endanger the operator, it can prolong the time that you use to get into wherever you're trying to get into, and cause more problems for those folks as you're trying to get in there. So, or for yourself or your team to get inside there to do that. So, axes are the most common type of cutting tool in firefighting, and they have a lot of different uses. So this one's dirty. I was going to try and get it washed before we showed it, but this is a pick head axe. Obviously, it gets used a fair amount. It's got a roughed up fiberglass handle on it, and it's still got a lot of drywall and junk on it anyways. But this can be used for a couple of different things. Typically, you're not going to want to use this as a striking tool because of the pick head axe. You can't use it for that. But if you got a wooden door where your mule kick or something like that didn't work, you could use like a baseball swing, and this door opens the wrong way. But if I were trying to open a inward swinging door with this, I could hit right into here if I have a wooden, instead of the steel frame. If I have a wooden frame here, I could take my pickaxe and I could take and swing it into the wooden frame so that it's got a good catch, and then I can use it as a pry tool to break into through the hinge and pop that door open if I need to. They call it the baseball swing. You get back away from it a little bit, do a good swing into that wooden door frame, and then you can use the head of the axe and you can use it as a prying tool to get through a door and get in that way. You can use it as a striking tool. You just have to use the top part of it for that. Remember, you want to strike close to where the latch or where the deadbolt is, and you want to just straightforward swing that way. Okay? So that's one of them. The other axe I already have set up as a married set here, or what they call the iron of the irons. Okay? Typically your flat axe and your Halligan tool are considered the irons, or a married set of tools. And if you're going to breach a door, you need both of these tools so you can easily put them together. I just threw a Velcro strap on here just to hold it together. Just makes it convenient for carrying it up to the door, and you just put your forked end over your axe, and then you can carry your tool up a lot safer to where you're going to be working with it. Okay? But the flathead axe, when it's separated out, can be used as a striking tool or a cutting tool both. Good dog. If you can get the strap on. So you can use the back flat side, you can use that for your driver, or you can flip it over and you can use, of course, the sharp end for any cutting if you need to get access through a door that way anyways. Okay? So that's the flat and the pick head axe. Bolt cutters is another tool. We've got some lighter ones, and we have a heavier set on our engine anyways. It can be used for a lot of different things, getting through fencing or whatnot. Cutting torches we do not have. I don't know any other departments, you guys carrying cutting torches at all, or no, pretty rare. They're take some training to use, and
One, but we
don't take it anywhere, just in the station, or yeah. So rebar cutters, if you have a place where you have a lot of security bars, a lot of places will have those rebar cutters so they can get through those security. Basically, it's a mini jaws or a mini hydraulic cutter that just cuts through rebar, and its only purpose is to cut through those security bars to get access to windows and doors as they needed. And then of course you got your hand saws on that list, and we've got a variety of hand saws, but of course the power tools usually are quicker and more efficient, but sometimes a good hand tool will get you to where you need to be as well. So they can be powered in a number of ways. Electrical, gasoline, hydraulic, whatever it happens to be, air in some cases. So make sure that you always use them safely. You're going to see this as a theme here as we go through here, but always wear your eye protection, hearing, and hand protection. Misuse can lead to property damage and injury. And then don't use inflammable atmosphere because sparks can cause fire or explosion. The one example they gave in your book I thought was pretty good, where they talked about the firefighter carrying the saw over his shoulder as he was going to do a task. Got back there, started the tool up, didn't realize that the cap had been open when he was carrying it over his back, and it dumped a bunch of gas down his back, and he started creating sparks with a rotary saw and ended up starting himself on fire, and had to have another firefighter put his coat out for him, and then of course he's out of service then because he didn't realize the gas had spilled down his back. So just things like that that you just need to be aware of to make sure that you're using your tools correctly anyways. So again, here's that theme going all the way through it. So wear eye, hearing, and hand protection when you're operating a power saw. Don't force power saws beyond its design limits. If there's manufacturer recommendations, be aware of that. That's how tools get damaged. Okay, we've had some chainsaws come back with bent bars before because people are trying to make it do more than what it can do.
It's not hard.
Right. So, yep, people will crank on stuff and on tools and use it improperly. So don't use it past its limits if you can do that. And then, of course, don't use power saws in a flammable atmosphere. They talk about electrical or battery-powered circular saws. We don't have a circular saw because we don't do a lot of the overhaul operations where we return the house to normal. Typically, we leave that up to the owner of the structure or to their insurance company to secure. Because the small volunteer fire departments, that's just too time consuming for us to do. But in some departments in bigger cities, there's a truck that rolls up and they re-secure the house. They plywood the windows, they plywood the doors, they secure stuff up. Otherwise, the big thing that you see them used for is urban search and rescue, collapsed buildings, things like that. They'll cut wood structures to secure up a building so it doesn't continue to fall or create a risk or hazard anyways. So that's another possibility for use of the circular saws in that area. Rotary saws, almost every department has them. A lot of times they're referred to as a K12 saw. That was a brand of firefighter saw for a long time. Just depends on what you get. Most of them are now commercially available, and there's a lot of different ones that are out there. They have interchangeable blades, and depending on what surface you're using them on, obviously they can create a lot of sparks. So you have to be aware of that, creating secondary fires or problems. So you should always have somebody backing them up on safety, whether it's with a watering can or fire extinguisher or something, or even just a hose line to help protect them with that. Depending on the blade that you have in there, most fire departments use a multi-blade or a rescue blade that's designed for firefighters to use, so they can use it on most surfaces or multiple surfaces. You should be aware of what the limitations of that blade is. Okay, so if you have a rotary saw, you should check and see what kind of blade you have on there and see if it's appropriate to use it on. Whether it's masonry, metal, wood, whatever it happens to be. Could be different sized teeth on them, large teeth or fine teeth, or it could even be carbide or diamond tipped blades, depending on what your fire department chooses to use. Ours, I believe, is a carbide tipped saw. So it can be used for most things. I think the only thing we don't use it for is masonry, unless it's absolutely necessary. So just remember with those saws that typically at full power they can spin as fast as, I believe, 6,000 rotations per minute. And when you go to set the tool down, remember that blade doesn't stop when you let off the throttle, it continues to spin. Even after you shut it off, it can take up to 30 to 40 seconds to continue spinning when you shut it down. So don't leave the tool with the wheel spinning, make sure it's come to a complete stop before you walk away from the tool to make sure that nobody else gets hurt. Okay? We talked about that. This one's a duh. Don't use a rotary saw to cut the shell of any storage tank that might contain flammable vapors. Okay?
Seen someone using.
If I see you going over and using it on an LP tank, I may let Darwin take over from that point. No, I'm just kidding. But
But yeah,
you probably won't be with us much longer after that, so. Okay? The blade guards on some rotary saws are not designed for use with carbide tip blades, so make sure that if that's what you have in your saw, make sure that your cover is designed to take that blade if needed, so. Reciprocating saws and chainsaws, they both have advantages in specific circumstances. I love reciprocating saws. Good tool to use on the fire ground. They're portable, lightweight, a lot less dangerous than the rotary saws that we just talked about, and pretty multi-purpose. Okay, those rotary saws come in handy for certain applications, but for almost everything else, I love a reciprocating saw. And you can get the same, you can get different blades for all of them. We have demolition blades, we have blades for wood, we have blades for metal in our kits. So you do have to look to see, but they're easy to interchange. A simple twist of the end, slide the old blade out, put a new blade in. Okay, and we've worn out several blades on our units by practicing cutting cars. Okay, so the reciprocating saws, you work very well for extrication and for working in structures and things like that. It's kind of our go-to saw most of the time for us. And it's battery powered, so. And then chainsaws, of course, have their applications as well. Just depends on what you're getting into and, again, picking the best tool for the job anyways. Prying tools, they help open doors and windows, locks, and move heavy objects, providing mechanical advantage for you. There's lots of different prying tools that are out there, and I think we own about most of them. The most common one that we go after, though, is the Halligan bar that you see there. It's the most universal and easy to use. Usually it's constructed from a single piece of high carbon steel. Varies in length from 30 to 36 inches. And it depends. There's all kinds of different tools out there that have different ends on them. At one time, a big one that they were selling in the fire departments even was named after a certain movie saying it's called the FUBAR tool. Okay? So it's F'd up beyond any recognition was the term. FUBAR is what they use, and there's actually a tool named after that, and we have one in our fire truck, believe it or not. So, but there's lots of different ones out there that you can use. Sometimes guys have a favorite one that they go to. Again, the most common though is the Halligan bar with your adze in, usually a spike, and then the Halligan fork on the end of it anyways. So pretty universal, pretty tough piece of equipment typically for your fire department to use. Got the right one here, there we go. Hydraulic prying tools come in different forms. There's specific benefits and drawbacks to them. There's manually powered ones. There used to be, and some fire departments still have them, called a rabbit tool. It was a separate cylinder of hydraulic fluid that you would hand pump, and then it would separate a couple of teeth that would come out like that. We actually have two of them, but neither of them are on the fire truck because I don't know what condition they're in or not. They're up on the old stuff on top of the storage over at Arnold's Park if you want to see what they look like. But some departments still have those in service and still use them. They're good for separating doors and door jambs if you need to. They're very slow to operate though. Take several pumps to get very much spread on those rabbit tools or to get them to go very far apart. But they are smaller, lighter, and easier to carry. But the drawbacks are they're labor intensive and they operate a little bit slower. And then there's the hydraulic door openers, and then of course your jaws of life. Not sure what recuse tools are. I think it's supposed to be rescue tools. like spreaders and rams. So your Jaws of Life can help you get into a lot of places as well. In fact, I used our Jaws of Life for our big fire down in Milford that we got called for mutual aid. Had a large set of doors on the back storage or Morton building that needed to be opened, and they were secured somehow on the inside. There was no obvious lock on the outside of the doors. Tried hand tools, couldn't even get them to separate, so went and got the Jaws of Life, stuck them in between the doors, got it open enough, and overrode the security system so then we could open the sliding doors to get into that section and kept it from burning down anyways. So just another use for those tools. The disadvantage there though is it's a heavy tool and if you have to carry it very far back, but it is and it only opens so far. So the spread on those is only so far, so you may have to block or use additional tools to help you out with that. Pushing and pulling tools, typically limited uses for forcible entry, but you can open ceilings and walls, and you can break glass if you need to. Okay, so that's another use for those tools, and we'll talk about how to safely break glass if you're using a pike pull for that type of thing here shortly. And striking tools are basic hand tools with a weighted head attached to a handle. The most basic, of course, of all is a sledgehammer. I don't remember that we have a sledgehammer on any of the trucks, I don't think. So, I don't think we have a basic striking tool. And I know we don't have a battering ram anyways, so, but some fire departments do carry those. I know the battering ram worked well for the Stone Fountain fire. Had a lot of smoke in the hallway, and so they were taking doors to check to see if there were residents in those. And so the police department got out their battering rams and they were popping doors with those. But again, you have to be careful, and even those guys that have experience breaking those doors ended up, one of them ended up in the ER with a wrist injury because his battering ram got ahead of him and ended up injuring his wrist. So all things have to be careful with anyways as you're utilizing them. Forcible entry tools, we talked about already, the irons. So it's the flathead axe again with the Halligan bar, and you can just marry them up by setting them together. You can simply carry them like that if you want to, or you can put the strap around them. It does make them a little easier to carry, but just marrying them up like that, you can usually set them somewhere and they'll hang out together until you're ready to use them. But it does take two people to operate those together anyways as you go. So married set or the irons is something that you'll have to, I'm sure, remember as to what they're called anyways. Again, safety guidelines when working with forcible entry tools. Make sure you're wearing your full personal protective equipment. Make sure you're using undamaged tools, okay? My favorite example, and he's a captain, and he doesn't think it's as funny as we do. I think he's getting better at thinking it's funny now, but we had a captain that was breaking a window out of an apartment fire, and as he went to go break it, he didn't use proper technique. He just used one hand, kind of stood off to the side because he was afraid the fire was going to flash out the front big window. And he took an axe in one hand and he took a swing, and as he went through the window, the axe left his hand and he ended up throwing the axe right into the fire. So a fireman on another department found the axe, sanded down the handle, and repainted it for us and returned it as a present to that certain captain. And
It was
so
sure pretty too.
it was. So we may give him a hard time about it from time to time. Try and use the right tool for the right opening. Make sure you're using the tool for its intended purpose. Make sure you balance yourself on both your feet and make sure there's enough room to operate the tool. And the videos I'm going to show you, they also use verbal communication. So when the one person holding the Halligan bar is ready, they'll tell the person that's going to do the striking to strike. You'll hear them talk about strike and drive and stop. That way they're communicating as it goes, and it's a good idea to do that, is to use that communication. So when the guy holding the Halligan is ready, says strike, then the strike guy knows that he can go ahead and strike that tool, and he's ready for it when he goes. If you don't communicate that, you can obviously get injured just because of the nature of the equipment that you're using anyways, so. When the door does give, there's gonna be a sudden release of energy, okay, just like that window broke when he was breaking out that release of energy he wasn't expecting, and that head of that axe, of course, carried that continued, motion, and so he ended up losing control of the tool as he went from there. Make sure that people that don't need to be there or out of the area, be aware of the environment that's going on. Sometimes we get so excited about forcing that entry, we forget to check to see is the hose team ready to go in. And if they're not ready to go in and you force that door open and give that fire a big gulp of air, what's gonna happen? Gonna build fast, right? And get out of control before we're ready to finish it off, so. Follow your department's guidelines or your manufacturer guidelines for the tools. Keep them in their designated place. So once you're done with them, that's my pet peeve on the scene, is people just setting stuff down, especially in the winter time, because then it disappears. Okay? Had a $10,000 camera get set down on a fire once and got buried with ash, and I was chewing some butt on the person that left it behind until he went back in and dug through and found it, because he set the tool down. That tool should have been brought back to the fire truck and put by the fire truck or at a home base anyway, so that we knew where it was and not set down on that fire scene. So make sure that if you're using tools, that you keep track of them and get them back to where they're supposed to go anyways. And then when you're traveling, make sure that if they're in a truck and it's inside the cab, that they're secured in those brackets. Okay? Repair or replace any damaged tools right away. Obviously, prying tools used wrong can create hazards. If the job calls for it, use a larger tool, and unless it's designed for it, don't use a prying tool for striking. We see that a lot, where somebody will grab the Halligan and use it to use as a hammer or a striking tool. You can use it some for that. This one is designed for it. It does have a striking surface on the back, but it's not as weighted as the axe is on the end. So you're not gonna get as good of a strike as you would if you had the proper tool, a sledgehammer or the weighted flathead axe anyways. I always lose this thing. When you're doing rotary power or chainsaws, some things that you should do to prevent injury: match the saw or saw blade to the task. We talked about that. Don't force it beyond its design limits. Wear your protective gear. Inspect the saw before and after you use it. Don't use it around flammable materials. And then maintain your situational awareness. Keep unprotected, non-essential people away from where you're working. Follow the manufacturer's guidelines. Keep the blade and chain sharpened. Hidden hazards. When you're using that K12, it'll cut through pretty much anything. If you're doing an exterior wall breach on a structure, what do we have to worry about behind there? Power, water, okay, gas, all things that you have to think about where you're cutting at and what could be behind there. And then we talked about it already. Remember, those blades continue to spin. Use the appropriate blades on the saw. Remember, when you go to use that K12 and it's spinning that fast, where's it going to want to carry? The direction the wheel's turning, right? So if it's turning forward, as you go to do that cut, where's that saw going to want to carry to? Push down or up, depending on which way it's spinning. Okay? Chainsaw, same way. It's going to pull in the direction that it's spinning anyways. Make sure you get that machine up to full RPM. That'll help prevent binding. And store the blade in a clean, dry environment. They say not to store those blades anywhere where there's gasoline fumes, especially specific types of blades, because it can cause breakdown of the blade. So that's something we're going to have to look at too, because I think we keep our gas in the same compartment. So we'll have to check the manufacturer's instructions and see if that's allowed or not. So, all right. So we talked about that. Carrying tools. This will be one thing that as you do your lift up with a rope, or as you do other things, they're going to be looking for to make sure that you do it properly as well. So, axes. When you carry an axe, you should carry it with the sharp end away from you. Put your hand on top and tuck it inside. Okay, that way if you fall, it's not this way and obviously cause injury if you fall or trip on a fire scene. The sharp end away from you and tuck it in close to your body is how you should walk with that when you're carrying an axe, is the proper way to do it. How do we see firefighters doing it most of the time on scene? Swinging it around with the heavy end down, right? Okay? Proper way to carry should be up next to you, tight into your body, and with the sharp end pointed away from you. Okay?
Why in the book did they say, maybe I read it wrong, but did it say with the glove hand over the blade?
Let's
In
look.
this picture here, it kinda looks like he's doing that too, and it's like, man, if you fell, there goes your fingers.
Right.
That way you can find your fingers later.
Well, I mean, I get the concept of running to somebody else, but if
You
you
don't wanna
fell
dull-
face
I
first-
typically say,
You don't wanna dull the blade by hitting on the ground,
Right.
so.
I usually say put them on top.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think no.
No, that's like.
I
this
mean, these
picture,
blades
it
aren't
looks like
super sharp anyways.
If you fell
They're not
with your full
supposed to be,
body
but if you
on it.
fell and put enough force, yeah, it could cause some damage, so I say put it on top, and that's what every instructor's ever showed me, so. Okay? So pickaxe adds a little more excitement to it, but again, into your side, keep that clear in there, you know, so it's kinda pointed away from you.
It's safer to carry it down.
Until you hit your shin with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Drag it by.
Yeah, you're supposed to have it tied up and drag it by a rope.
With a half hitch.
Prying tools, okay, you just want, I mean, they have all these different sharp ends again, just bring it in close to your body, make sure you got control over it anyways, that way. Okay, so that's prying tools, or combination tools, you can bring them in that way too. Pike poles and hooks. So if you're carrying pike poles and hooks on the scene, they want you with the point end down while you're carrying it outside and into the structure. Okay, so the working end they want down so that you can be safer that way, and then once you get into the structure, because it can be unwielding in here with the different ends on them, then you can have it ready and you can carry it up away. Just make sure that the hook parts are clearing the height that you need to anyway, so that they're ready to go with that once you're inside the structure. And then bring them more perpendicular to you so that you're not swinging around and risking hitting other people. Okay? As you read the book, make sure I'm not telling you something wrong. Striking tools are the one they want you to carry down. So if you've got sledgehammers, something like that for striking tools, they do want you to carry the heavy end down so that if you do drop it, it's closer to the ground and doesn't cause damage that way. Okay? Power tools. They have a 10-foot rule. If you have to carry it more than 10 feet, it should not be running. Shut it off, carry it to where you need to, restart it where you're gonna work with it. Okay, so you should be within 10 feet of your working area, what you're gonna do with the power tool. If you're not within that 10 feet, then you should shut the power tool off, carry it to where you need it, and then restart it there. You can start it at the truck, make sure it's gonna start and run, but then when you get to where you're gonna work with it, or before you get there, shut it off, and then when you get to where you're gonna work with it, restart it. They also say make sure that, do a quick check, make sure the gas cap's on tight, so that when you're carrying it, you're not spilling fuel, and make sure that it looks like everything's ready to go with that tool. Just do a quick overlook or a quick inspection of that tool to make sure it's ready to go before you use it. Okay? Make sense on all those things pretty much? Alright. I've been blabbing for about an hour. Let's take about a 5 or 10 minute break here.